Hey there folks, welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we're going to be talking about the newest album from Yelawolf called Trial by Fire. You know, I'm not really sure how to talk about Yelawolf these days. I mean, I'd like to open up this review with the discussion about how after the underwhelming Radioactive, he pivoted into a country rap vein for his sophomore project Love Story in 2015. An album I still think is underrated to this day. Seriously, even though that album definitely has its flaws, Yelawolf was still ironing out the kinks in the genre fusion, and the record probably ran a little bit too long for its own good, plus that rather awkward religious pivot. But two songs from that record made my year-end list in 2015 of the best songs of the year. And while both a considerable percentage of country and hip-hop fans seem utterly allergic to the concept, speaking as somebody who knows both genres and their similarities, and who have heard entirely too many bro-country acts try hip-hop flows, Yelawolf was really ahead of the curve. He was a good rapper. You don't get signed to Shady if you're not. He had good taste in country music, which is more than you can say for most bro-country acts, and he was willing to write frankly about the common topics that only really underground hip-hop and indie country would touch these days. Poverty, depression, alcoholism, and a backwoods that felt far more textured and realistic than any bro-country pandering could ever pull off. And if we could just proceed to the new album from there, I would be thrilled. But let's be blunt, we need to talk about this. Yelawolf has had a bad couple of years since Love Story. He got considerable and, in my opinion, justified backlash for his Confederate flag comments in 2015, which led to a lot of hip-hop to want nothing more to do with him. His friend Shoddy Fat was killed in a car accident, and when you factor in the pressures to exceed Love Story's surprising success, you can see why it led to a breakdown on tour last year, which led to dates being canceled and caused Trial by Fire to be pushed back to now. And yet, he pulled it together. A full hour-long release with guest appearances from both hip-hop and country that he produced entirely himself, and enough drama to surely inform some of the subject matter. So okay, I'm intrigued. What did I find on this Trial by Fire? Well, this is the sort of record that's a little tricky to discuss, because for all intents and purposes, it's a leaner, sharper, rougher album from Yelawolf that shows him further refining this genre fusion, and yet at the same time, I can't quite say I enjoyed it as much as a whole as the best moments on Love Story. Let's put it simply, Love Story was buoyed to greatness by 4 or 5 absolutely incredible songs to compensate for its weaker moments and its cumbersome length. Whereas, while this Trial by Fire, it's shorter and overall more uniform in quality, I'm not quite sure it's got those lightning in a bottle moments that would really put it over the top, really make it a great record. It's certainly good, but is it great? Well, believe me, it's hard to say that when, as a performer, Yelawolf only seems to be getting better. As I said earlier, you don't get signed to Shady if you can't rap your ass off, and while Yelawolf still has a frustrating habit of fudging a few rhymes here and there, his flows are diverse and complex, and his emotive delivery has only gotten stronger, which helps given that his admittedly weak singing voice is now being reinforced by a sharper growl that shows a little bit more intensity. Granted, it doesn't always come through, and you get songs like Row Your Boat, where he tries to sing through most of the song, even despite a good rhyme scheme, but you know what, that's the exception, not the rule. Granted, it helps that he's picking up a much bigger range of singers for a lot of his hooks, from the bluesier rasp of his crew like Bones Owen, country acts like Brice, Joshua Headley, and Wynonna Judd, and even Juicy J's rather curt hook on Punk that I kind of liked. And while I'll admit to being seriously worried about Kid Rock showing up on Get Mine, he's isolated to the hook to provide a crescendo of bluster, and it's easily the most fiery and captivating that he's sounded in years. Hell, separate Kid Rock away from his asinine writing, he does have some charisma. I see why people made him a star in the first place. And one thing that Yelawolf deserves a ton of credit for is his skill for setting a scene and painting a picture with his words. Even if you can't connect at all with the stories and lifestyle that he's talking about, his skill in describing that Alabama world in textured, often frightening detail does wonders in terms of immersing the audience in his desperate, whiskey-soaked, decaying worldview. And if there's something that's going to guarantee Yelawolf an audience probably for the rest of his career, regardless of quality, it's this: providing a voice for those in rural America who can't live in the hip-hop opulence or the bro-country flashiness, those in that world who don't otherwise have a voice in mainstream culture. And while there's a fair amount of this record that might as well serve as a rebirth for Yelawolf in fully claiming that voice, hell, the opening track literally features his birth reincarnated with the spirit of an old outlaw, because of course it's the kind of story he would tell. He's not just telling his story either. Songs like Do It For Love and Violin show him writing about poor men and and women turning to crime in order to put something on the table for their children or to find some vestige of a better life. And True to Yourself is so rich with detail that you almost don't even realize that Yelawolf doesn't use any pronouns to refer to himself as the main figure in the song. And even when he does place himself as the main protagonist, his self-criticism is pretty scathing, and I appreciate that. From touching on the self-destructive alcoholism that laces Daylight to becoming exactly like the same outlaws he used to fear on Shadows. He never calls it the trap, but it's hard not to see a little bit of a parallel there, at least when it comes to class. And you know what? To my mild surprise, Yelawolf doesn't shy away from some political commentary on this demographic either, most notably on the very pointed Row Your Boat, which on top of a pretty great construction where the last word of each bar matches with the word of the next bar, also adds words for rural Americana falling under the sway of authoritarianism or the Klan, neither of which he has any time for given his pretty hard individualist streak. But you do also get a sense of how that came to be developed for him, and this is where the record arguably cuts the deepest in terms of its content. As much as I like Daylight, it really does kind of feel a little bit like Empty Bottles Part 2, but then you have a song like Son of a Gun, where he confronts his absentee father with who he is now, and with the gunshots echoing, it's a haunting song. And while he recognizes that mirror reflection in how many of those same vices run deep for both him and his father, that commitment to being a better parent gives songs like Violin and Keeps Me Alive some true weight in their details and emotionality. And conversely, it makes Sabrina, a parent's nightmare that rivals Clipping's Story 2 for its crescendo and intensity. It hits as hard as any of Yelawolf's best songs, easily the best track here. But on the flip side, you could definitely make the argument that for all of Yelawolf's detail, it's more setting the stage for stories than actually telling more of them. And while there is less empty posturing than you would expect, you do wind up wishing that his level of detail also carried a little more over into his commentary, that he went a little bit deeper. He's showing that potential, and thus you get the feeling that on some level, Yelawolf is still entrenching himself in this genre, laying all the groundwork stylistically so he can say more going forward. Again, this does feel a little bit transitional, just like Love Story did. And that doesn't surprise me either, because from a production standpoint, Yelawolf is probably the closest he's ever been to fully nailing his fusion of hip-hop and outlaw country. All the more potent considering, again, he's the only producer on this project, and he's coordinating everyone from Leonard Skinner keyboardist Peter Keys, Bones Owen on guitar and often bass, the legendary Robbie Turner on pedal steel, numerous fiddles, electric harmonica, and trumpet players, and even Flea of Red Hot Chili Peppers on bass and Travis Barker on drums for punk. Hell, me and Mike Seatown once made the comment and we cracked a joke that we didn't exactly need Yelawolf to become this decade's Everlast. And while you could have made that comparison on parts of Love Story, I don't think you could here. This is overall a much more diverse and hard-hitting album, until of course you start looking at some of the production details. And look, I will fully admit this is nitpicking, but if Yelawolf is going to be at the forefront of producing this sound going forward, I want to ensure this is on the record. Maybe he can pick up on some of this. As such, the biggest observation I have is that he's probably a better country producer than he is a hip-hop producer. With the exception of the horns, which can sound a little bit too blaring at points on True to Yourself, I really like the pickups he uses for the fiddles and the strings and the majority of the guitars, and especially the pedal steel, which complements Struggle Jennings' voice on Struggle Speaks really damn well. It's a really good interlude. The hip-hop production, unfortunately, can feel a little bit clumsier, and this has everything to do with the tonal blending of some of his synthesizers and keyboards on songs like Do for Love. It's not a bad tone, but it could be blended better with the rest of the mix. Or the plinking tones on Row Your Boat, which just sounded a little bit thin. Hell, most of this album could be afforded a mix that doesn't quite feel as clean. The texture comes through in much of the instrumentation, sure, but for as much as Yelawolf's lyrics paint a picture, you find yourself wishing the production got a little bit more there too. Maybe a little bit more weathered, or rough, or organic, or lo-fi, and the drummer vocal pickups could do it. Or maybe do something closer to Get Mine, with the old school DJ scratching that along with Yelawolf's delivery, kind of reminiscent of an old Beastie Boys song, and I like that. It's less of a problem than it was on points of Love Story where that difference was more pronounced, and you can tell that he knows what sounds in order to use to emphasize the atmosphere or hooks or crescendo. Hell, look at Sabrina for some fantastic atmosphere, but you can also tell Yelawolf is still somewhat refining his craft as a producer. But as a whole, Man, this is a record that's right on the cusp of greatness for me. I'll say it again. It's leaner, it's sharper overall across the board, it's a fair bit darker, which is only a good thing, and while I don't quite think there is a hook that can match Empty Bottles or Heartbreak or the sly insight of American You, it avoids many of the missteps that characterize Love Story as a whole. The religious elements, while they are still here, they don't quite feel as overstated, it doesn't hit nearly as many moments that could be interpreted as corny, and it doesn't go nearly as long. It's still a long album at an hour, but it's not like an hour and 15 minutes. And beyond all that, I really can't think of a fusion of these two genres at this point this is as refined, textured, or capable of so much more going forward as what Yelawolf is delivering here. As such, very light, 8 out of 10, and definitely a recommendation. But really, his demographic does not need me to tell them how much they're already gonna get this album. As I've always said, hip-hop and country have far more in common than many people want to think or believe. And yet with Trial by Fire, Yelawolf continues to find that synthesis that only proves it. So yeah, check this out. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. Like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. I know, like with the last Yelawolf review, this is probably going to be controversial, and I know some people, they see country, hip-hop, these two don't match. Believe it or not, they really do. I should do a special comment on how much these two genres have in common, because it is a disturbing amount these days. But in other words, if you want to buy the record, links in the description below, and I got the poll up there. I'm curious where you guys fall in this, especially with comparison to Love Story. Beyond that, anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, I'm all ears. If you guys want to support this channel or get involved in my scheduling process, link to my Patreon right over there, where 3 times a week you guys get to vote on my schedule, and once per week for the higher tier contributors get to add albums, movies, or even a top 10 list to that schedule. More details right over there, but till then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.